Good morning. Thanks for joining me. Hour 3 is upon us. I am delighted to have joining me. You know, I can never say enough great things about an organization, Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, aka WILL. They are, they're on the front lines on our behalf, for our freedoms and liberties here in Wisconsin. And without them, I don't know where we would be. I mean, this is an organization that takes on cases that affect us in our everyday lives here in Wisconsin, local issues that should be of concern to all citizens. And without Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, again, I don't know what we would do. I'm joined by Will attorney Lucas Weber this morning. Good morning, Lucas. How are you?
Hey, good morning, Meg. Thanks for those kind words, and thanks for having me on the program.
Yeah, well, it's all true. And you know, as I was waiting to go on air, I was thinking about how you and I first, under what circumstance, and I'm sure it was a case that you were defending, but then you were you've been gracious enough several times to participate in different events that our group Get Involved Wisconsin has planned, and have had the opportunity and privilege to get to know you really well. So I'm grateful for all of the attorneys and all the other staff at Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, and in particular because of what you guys do on a daily basis to protect and defend our freedoms and liberties. And I mean, I guess, how long, I mean, and you know, maybe I'm blindsiding you with this, but how long has Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty been in existence?
So we were founded by my boss, our general counsel, Rick Essenberg, back in 2011. So we're coming up on, this is our 14th year. So.
Well, and I've had Rick on as a guest in the past, and I mean, he usually says something like, "Oh, the associates are much younger and smarter than I am," and so, and I mean, he's very gracious about that. But it's good that he had this vision at the time that he did in 2011 to start this organization, and again, grateful for all that you do. So let's talk about I don't want to say greatest, but the latest with regard to another citizen here in Wisconsin that Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty is helping.
Yeah, so this is an appeal that we actually filed in circuit court last week, but it goes back much further than that. It goes back several months. So in Wisconsin, if you are a law enforcement officer, you have to undergo a certain amount of training, and you have to maintain your certification as a law enforcement officer. I think everybody kind of understands the basics of that. What Wisconsin law used to say for the longest time was if you were a law enforcement officer and you left a job, you had up to 3 years to get a new job without having to go back and repeat the police academy again. So you kind of had a 3-year grace period there to find a new job. Back in 2021, very quietly, the state board changed that policy, and they changed it just, via vote, and that's it. And they just said, hey, we're actually only going to allow full-time officers to have that 3-year period. Part-time officers would no longer be allowed to leave their job and have 3 years to get a new one. And that's where our client comes in. So our client is a police officer who graduated from the police academy back in 2014. He works part-time as a law enforcement officer. He's worked at various law enforcement agencies in the state, has a spotless record. He's never had so much as a complaint filed against him. The reason he works part-time is because he's a dad. He's raising his son. He's a family man, and he needs to dedicate substantial time to the care and upbringing of his son, and he just can't work as a full-time in law enforcement, so he's been working part-time. He left a job in the fall of 22 and took a new job in the spring of 23. There was about maybe 9 months in between those two, and he was then informed a couple of months later by the state that, oh, sorry, you actually have to go back and repeat the training academy again because of this policy that says part-time officers no longer get the 3-year grace period. So I told him he would have to go back, start from zero, a 720-hour, I believe, law enforcement academy, as though he was a brand new recruit. We appealed that decision of the board. Internally, they met and voted down his appeal. They voted to uphold their original decision, and then that's what we appealed to the circuit court. And so a judge will get to take a fresh look at it. Our argument is that in adopting this policy, the board broke the law. They didn't go through the actual statutory process that state agencies have to go through if they're going to adopt an enforceable policy. All they did was take a vote, and then they updated their policy manual. But that's not how it works. They actually have to give notice. They have to have an opportunity for comment. They have to go through publication requirements. They skipped all of that here, and they skipped all of it to my client's detriment. And frankly, to a lot of the communities here in Wisconsin who rely on part-time law enforcement officers who are also impacted by this.
Well, and I would gather, Lucas, that like every other profession in the state, there is a shortage of willing and able and dedicated employees. And so you'd think that the state would look at someone like your client, Noah Gausman, and say, you know what, whether or not this is a policy, can't we make an exception for this guy? And frankly, I think the policy should be changed. But I mean, we really can't afford to lose someone like your client.
Absolutely. And that's actually where it gets even more outrageous. The state agency, the Law Enforcement Standards Board, has actually begun the process now of repealing this policy that they adopted. They've had several meetings about it where various law enforcement officers complained because it made it so difficult to get part-time law enforcement officers. So there's a kind of, I think, a general understanding, and I obviously can't speak for the law enforcement community in the state, but I think there was a general understanding that the policy was not a good one. But unfortunately, it was still being enforced against our client. And, when he started raising that issue, they of course come up with other pretextual reasons why they think he shouldn't be certified, and they're not going to allow him to be a police officer again unless he goes back and again repeats that entire law enforcement academy from A to Z. And that's simply an unreasonable request, and one that he simply can't abide by. So,
well, and I mean, I would imagine that if he has to go back and put in all these hours in training, it's obviously at great cost to him as well. And is there? I presume there's some sort of fee that he has to pay to the state in order to, get a piece of paper that says he's now qualified for the job that he's already qualified for.
Exactly, and it's just time. It's money for him. It's taking him away from the time that he needs to spend raising his son. It's just an unfortunate situation. And, the reason why state law requires administrative agencies to go through a process when they're going to adopt these enforceable regulations is transparency. We always want to make sure that whenever a government actor is taking steps that will require the public to do things, the public is involved in that process. State law mandates it. That's good public policy that they have to go through these notice requirements. People need to be aware of what's going on. Because in this case, this state agency didn't do any of that, my client was completely unaware that this policy change had occurred until it was used against him. And they told him, oh, sorry, we changed the policy and you don't qualify anymore. And that's not fair. I mean, as an issue of basic fairness, it's unfair, but it's also just bad public policy. And it's not the way we should be making these decisions. And it's not what state law requires. So, like I said, we've now filed that appeal in the circuit court, and a judge is going to be able to take a fresh look at what the state agency did here. Anybody who's ever been up against a state agency knows that the appellate process is a little one-sided. You basically have to appeal to the state agency, and then the state agency gets to rule on your appeal first. But once you exhaust those remedies, then you can take it to court, where a judge gets to have a fresh look at it, and that's what our client's looking for. And we can just get a fresh set of eyes on this, and he can get his day in court and hopefully have some justice here for himself and set a standard for other part-time law enforcement officers who are being impacted by this.
Do you have any ideas about a better solution going forward? I suppose perhaps under a Republican governor and obviously a Republican majority in the legislature, to ensure that these state agencies are, that they're more afraid of breaking the law so that we don't have to go through this exercise. Because it seems to me, Lucas, that just substitute a different agency and substitute a different client, and this behavior seems to repeat itself over and over again.
It really does, and I think it's so important that we have people like my client who are willing to actually stand up and take it to court and fight it. I mean, if people just roll over and take whatever the state agency says, which happens all the time because it's expensive to go to court, it's time consuming. There are a whole host of reasons why somebody might not want to.
It's disruptive to your life too.
Absolutely, yeah, disruptive, and it takes time. It's a lengthy process, and I think too many people just kind of roll over and throw their hands up in the air. But what we really need are more people who are willing to fight back and fight for their rights. And I'm glad. It's an honor to be able to represent Noah. It's certainly an honor to be able to help a law enforcement officer here in Wisconsin. Have nothing but the utmost respect for our entire law enforcement community. So to be able to bring this one certainly is extra meaningful.
So can you walk our listeners through the process of how they go about if they perceive some injustice or some unlawful behavior by a government entity that they can reach out to your organization, and then the process that ensues?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you ever see a state agency that's doing something that just seems weird, whether it's a rule or a policy that they're trying to adopt, the first thing to do is to give us a call. And you can go on our website at will-law.org. There's a form on there that you can fill out. Our attorneys go read every single form that gets submitted. You can always reach out to me personally as well. I'm always happy to talk to anybody who's dealing with a state agency issue. And then one of the publications that we put out is called the Citizen's Guide to the Administrative State in Wisconsin. This is a free guide. It's on our website as a PDF. I'll be happy to mail a printed copy to anybody who wants one as well. But that's a guide that goes through the entire rulemaking process from start to finish and explains what the agencies have to do and how you can get involved. So a great opportunity there to just kind of learn more about this process. But certainly anybody who has any questions or thinks maybe a state agency is violating their rights should give us a call, and we'd be happy to look into it.
So I know you don't have a magic 8-ball, and I've learned a lot about attorneys is that generally they're very patient people because nothing ever happens at lightning speed. But do you have an inkling as to how this is going to be decided?
I obviously can't know any outcomes, but I will say this one should move a little faster than a traditional lawsuit. So when you do these kinds of administrative appeals, there's no discovery. There's no need to build an evidentiary record. The record is exactly what was before the agency. It just gets transmitted to the court. So it kind of cuts out that whole process of the lawsuit and just gets right into kind of the nuts and bolts of it. So hopefully we get a decision, relatively quickly compared to other lawsuits. And I'd be happy to, of course, keep you updated as this moves forward.
All right. So last question has to do with this particular client. And, just sort of going back to the process of getting Will's attention and then from submitting a request for assistance, legal assistance, what's the general time frame for, that a person can expect? Just I want people to have reasonable expectations.
Yeah, it really depends on each individual circumstances. It can take us a week or two to respond when we get things, just because we do get a lot of contacts from folks out there. But, really depending on the individual situation, if we need to work faster, we can.
Lucas!
Yes.
Oh, we got disconnected, unfortunately. Well, that, again, I think we got the gist of what he was saying, but of course it does vary. And I've had that experience myself because I personally have reached out to Will a number of times, not on behalf of something that's happened to me directly, but on behalf of others that have expressed concerns about either a state agency or even just a municipality, et cetera, behaving in an illegal manner. It is frustrating, and that's, I think, what bothers me so much about about this world, about this state we live in, is that we have to continue to fight against those in our government that are breaking the law, and we have to continue to be vigilant and diligent about doing so. All right, so on that note, because we got disconnected from Lucas Weber, again, I want to share with you their website, Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty. It's will-law.org, and if there's ever a time when you need legal representation for this type of situation, now you know where to go to. All right, on that note, speaking of going to, I'm going to take a break, and I may possibly pop in momentarily. Of course, the 10:30 news is coming up quickly, but I will return after this break on the Meg Ellefson Show on WSAU.